Gabrielle.
Hello, I just texted you. You can ignore that.
I was having trouble too, so I'm not sure where Scott is because he was going to be in person at
Hmm.
anyway, we'll just see who is able to join us. And
Okay.
hi, Stephanie.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
I think this meeting is being recorded already, just so folks know.
Yeah, it said so. It gave us a warning.
Yeah. I'm just gonna I'm gonna email. Did you have any trouble logging in, Stephanie?
No, not at all. I clicked on the link that was in your email
Hmm.
and it opened right up.
I had a message, the host has another meeting in progress at the same time. And then I got in, so I don't know what that means, so.
Rumph.
Scott is usually like completely, early and so I'm just gonna email.
Oh, there's Toby.
Thanks, Toby.
Okay.
Why don't we wait another minute and then I can take notes and see what we can get done with the smaller group.
Didn't Candy say that she was gonna
She
she was
texted
gonna
me a
come?
minute. She texted me at 5:30 that she actually can't join.
Oh, okay.
She had a family member's birthday party to go to that she'd forgotten about. So
How about Rachel?
no word from Rachel or Phil.
Hmm.
So um well, there are four of us, so we could adopt the minutes.
I don't think I was here. Was I there last week? Last time?
Um,
I don't think
Mm-mm.
so. No.
no, so we could, I mean, it's not critical. Well, I mean, maybe the post
Do
Thanksgiving.
you want me to try to call Scott or did you already try that?
Well, I only have his home number, but if you have a cell phone for him, Gabrielle, that would be great.
The number I have is a 456 number. I don't
Um,
know if that's a cell or not.
it sounds like a cell, but sometimes and it sounds like a home landline, but sometimes people were able to make their landlines into cell
Okay,
numbers.
I'm gonna mute myself and give him a call.
Okay,
I just talked with him on his cell phone and he said he was having computer problems.
oh, okay. Thanks,
Okay.
Toby.
I'll see if I can update you and let you know.
Okay. I will text Rachel. Rachel said she lost track of time and is coming. And I have also texted Phil, so we'll see. Sounds like we might be able to get enough folks to make a,
I just spoke with Scott and he's gonna try to log in.
great. Thanks, Toby.
Um. I wonder if he should try the link in your email as opposed to, I had a link in my calendar, which I must have copied from some earlier version of it. I'm just wondering if Scott tries the link from your email. I'm just gonna, I know it sounds obvious, but I'm gonna just send that to him.
Hey, Rachel, Scott's having technical problems, so Gabrielle's emailing him the link again, and Candy can't join us, and here's Scott joining. So,
Sorry to be late. I was
no,
sitting here ready to jump on and I was looking at the rules again because yes, I have worked on them, but I didn't quite get as far as I wanted to before to send them back. So um
no worries. So,
it just time got away from me and I apologize.
no, I had set my alarm and then I shut it off, and then all of a sudden it was 6 o'clock. It's like,
Yep.
all right, well, why don't we call, hey, Scott,
Here's Scott.
Ah, that was a mess. Okay,
we all struggled a bit, but we have 5 people. I think we have a quorum, so I'll call the meeting to order. Do you need a minute, Scott, to get your breath for minute taking?
thank you. I'm good. Thank you, though.
Um, now I've done all that, I've lost my agenda. One sec. Uh, so the plan for this evening was to adopt the minutes of our last meeting, November 4th. Talk about our meeting from a year from now. Barbara had a request. Update on the training, an update on the status of the zoning regs. Take some time, hopefully a chunk of most of our time will be on the rules of procedure. So, did everybody have a chance to look at the minutes of the November 4th DRB meeting, and is somebody willing to make a motion to approve those?
I move that we approve the minutes of November 4th, 2024.
Second.
Thank you, Gabrielle. All those in favor, please say aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, the motion is carried. I think Barbara sent this email to everybody that if we stick with our regular schedule, our November 2025 meeting would be November 19th, and it sounds like for some reason the town hall, there's some other activity planned for that evening. She proposed 3 dates, one of which is November 11th, which is a holiday, Veterans Day. So I was thinking we might not consider that date, which would lead Thursday, November 6th and Thursday, November 20th. It's a long ways away. Any preferences people wish to name, knowing that, of course, closer to the date, things may change in anyone's life.
I'd
Nothing
be
for
glad
me
to
at
settle.
this stage.
Yeah, I can't imagine, but we could settle on November 6th.
Number 6 sound good for people?
I'm good with 6.
Okay, that was easy. November 6th. I think in the email, I gave folks an update that the Vermont League of Cities and Town is prepared to give us a training on the evening of January 23rd, 6 p.m. It would be no more than 2 hours. It would be presentation on the roles of a DRB, and, how to hold effective hearings and how to write effective decisions. The DRB from East Montpelier is interested in joining us. There could be up to 7 of their members, which would then allow our town to split the cost that the league charges. So that's the plan. I just wanted to give an update. If anybody knows they can't attend, that would be helpful to know. But otherwise, we would be there in person with a Zoom option. Stephanie, I think, would join by Zoom, and I think there's somebody from East Montpelier who would join by Zoom.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah.
And I think the league is encouraging whoever can be there in person to be there in person. And I don't know, it's one of their attorneys who would provide the training, but I don't know who it is.
Did you say where?
At the town hall. Any questions, comments, requests?
Sounds very good. Thank you for setting that up.
Oh, of course. I'm learning how to use the portal, sending messages in the league's system, so.
There is one.
Hmm.
Oh, no.
The next topic was
You hold on.
status of our current zoning regulations. So Rachel, who's on the planning commission, may want to weigh in here, but my understanding is the town plan expired in February of 2024 before the town voted to adopt the new regulations that we've been working under. So in effect, those regulations are not in effect because the town has to have a current plan in order to adopt new regulations. Is that essentially accurate, Rachel?
Yes, that's right. And no one in town realized
Why
that the
not?
town plan was expired
Why not?
by town meeting. And in fact, we didn't realize until very recently it was expired. Because we've been working towards a December deadline of getting a new plan in place. So the planning commission's work has been a little bit upended as a result of that. And very likely what will happen is there will be minor updates to the expired town plan with just the statutory changes so that that can get approved as quickly as possible.
But not
And
too
then a larger overhaul that we've been working on for a new town plan will come after that.
It's outrageous.
The effects, there's a couple points. So one, the effects on current or most recent decisions of the DRB made under the regulations we thought were adopted, but weren't officially adopted. There's been no appeal of any of those decisions, and that people have a 30-day deadline in which to make an appeal, and people, no one was dissatisfied with the DRB's decision. So as I understand it, that there's not a concern relative to past decisions. And if we were to have an application
The
to
question.
review, we would do so under the old zoning regulations until, and this is my question, I'm not sure. Once the new town plan is adopted, even if it's just sort of updating statutory
Mhm.
requirements, does the town need to formally adopt the new regulations at the March 2025 town meeting?
That is my understanding of what's gonna need to happen.
So,
There, different so our town has said we need the town to adopt the town plan. But there is discretion for the select board to be the ones who have to adopt the town plan and the zoning ordinance, right?
No,
So our
no, it's the
select board,
townspeople do the zoning ordinance. The select board does the town plan. The townspeople have to adopt the zoning ordinance.
my understanding from the discussions that we've been having is that towns have discretion as to whether they have the whole town vote on the zoning ordinance
Well, that's something new then, because it's not the way it has been. Maybe you
I'm not
should-
saying it's not the way it has been. I'm saying that is how Calais has done it. But my understanding is Calais has had a choice between the town voting and the select board adopting it.
Have
So
you, Rachel, I'm really curious where that comes from, where you got that
I have not done
information.
any legal research on this because I don't sit on this or on the planning committee as a lawyer. I'm a lawyer, but I've not been asked to do any legal research on this. So all I can tell you is that has been part of the discussion that the planning commission has had over whether the select board could simply adopt the zoning regulation once the town plan is back in effect. No decisions have been made on that. I just know it's been a discussion.
So is it
Yeah,
fair
just-
to say, at this point, until the town plan is adopted and zoning regulations are adopted, and it's unclear whether it's the entire town or the select board that can adopt the regulations, until those two steps happen, we would be acting as the DRB under the pre-existing regulations.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that's what we need to know, and then we can ask, I can ask Kari to get clarity once the select board and the town with its lawyers and input from Rachel or Stephanie get clarity about who has to, or what is the practice, what will it be, and as to who is approving the regulations. When we know that, that will be information valuable for us to have, but not necessary for us to know in order to do our job.
Can I ask a question?
I asked Carrie to post the old version of the zoning regulations up on the town website, so they're back in place where people can have access to them.
Thanks, Toby.
I have a question, Willa.
Yeah.
I know that somebody said that the VLCT lawyer said that
Hmm.
since nobody appealed any of the decisions that were issued under the regulations that turned out not to be in effect, then there's no problem. I'm curious to know, because I didn't sit on any of those cases, if any of those permits that you issued during that period of time imposed any conditions on the applicants based on the new regulations that were supposed to be in effect. I think anyway, that's my question, whether any conditions were imposed that the permittees have to follow that are based on the revised regulations.
Well, the
I-
previous regulations also allowed us to impose conditions. So
Yeah, no, I'm
But-
just thinking, like, for instance, there's a difference in, my understanding is that under the new regulations, let's call them revised regulations, the shoreline district does not end at a road. Okay, that was a big change, because right now, well, under the existing regulations, the shoreland district only goes up to a road, and that ends then, depending on, it doesn't matter what the width is.
Hmm.
So if you impose some conditions based on somebody being in the new shoreland district, that's what I'm saying, that if you
I
looked
see.
at the
Well,
new
I think
shoreland
that
district, then
the-
impose conditions based on the location of the revised location of the shoreland district. That's what, you might have done something like that, and that's what I'm asking.
I would have to double check, at least the ones that I worked on writing. But the new version of shoreland in what we thought were the new rules was more strict than the old version of shoreland in most
Right.
ways.
Right.
So if something was limited in the new version, it would have been more lax in the old version. So I'm not sure that there would be, an issue.
But that's exactly my point, is it would have been stricter under the revised regulations. So if you were imposing any conditions based on the stricter regulations, that might not have applied if in fact the old regulations were in effect. I don't know that
Right.
you understand what I'm saying, because
I
that's a
think I'm
perfect
following what you're
example.
saying, but I think we go back to even the applicant only has 30 days to appeal a decision. So no one has appealed the decisions. And because there's such a strong policy of finality in this chapter of the Vermont statutes, I don't know that there would be anything an applicant or an interested person could appeal at this point.
It's not a question of appealing, it's a question of challenging the validity of it. If the regulations weren't actually in effect at the time that you imposed conditions under regulations that it turns out weren't in effect, it wouldn't be
Yeah,
a question of appealing, it would be a question of challenging.
And again, I think the time would be expired to do that because the way you would challenge would be an appeal.
Not necessarily, but you know,
I
I mean,
mean,
you
that's
guys
the
know, I didn't
exclusive
issue
remedy.
any, I didn't
Why
submit
don't-
those decisions. I
I
have
mean,
no
we-
idea whether this is irrelevant, whether this
Right.
applies or not, but it's something I think is an addition to a normal appeal. I don't think the appeal provisions would, I don't think they would apply, having done municipal law for about 30 years. That's where I'm coming from, that I'm not sure that this is an appealable issue. It's an issue of challenging after it was discovered that these regulations were actually not in effect. That might be a different question.
So
That's all.
why don't I try to capture that, but I think Gabrielle wanted to say something.
Yeah, just I understand what you're saying, Stephanie, and I hear what you're saying about appealing, Rachel, but even as a non-lawyer, I would think if somebody, and I don't think either of the two decisions involve shoreline, I don't think either of them, if I recall what we wrote, would have a problem. I don't remember
Yeah,
what
I don't think
conditions.
so.
But so my point would be like, I think the human thing to do is honestly to reach out to them and explain the situation. And I know they read Front Porch Forum and whatever, but I just think like, I do think it's a pretty valid point that Stephanie raised, like just essentially like one-on-one honesty, transparency. This is what happened. These were we wrote the decision based on the zoning regs we thought were active at the time. And in point of fact, uh, yeah, so I don't know if they still have a right to appeal in the official appeal process or what, but and I've kind of wondered about it all along, just because they're not appealing it. It just seems like they're the most impacted individuals by the fact that we had inactive zoning regs that we were following at the time. So it just seems like reaching out to those two parties would be a good thing to do.
My suggestion, that I ask Kari to check with the league about the difference between a challenge versus an appeal, the process, and that, so that would be one thing. And then if the group agrees, I mean, I like Gabrielle's suggestion because I agree with the transparency and the sort of just being respectful of individuals who've gone through this process. But check with Kari and the town before we do that as to how what would be the best way to reach out to people and what would we tell them? Like
I'm looking
if,
at the first of the two decisions and I'll get to the other one in a second. And basically our conditions are complete the project as proposed, follow your state registration requirements, comply with the state Shoreland Protection Act. And if your wastewater system fails, you have to go to ANR for a wastewater permit and certification. So I don't think any of those would be implicated.
I mean, and we could share all that. We could share those two decisions with the town's attorney and
Yeah.
say, so that we could then tell, because I
Idea.
think those individuals whose names I no longer remember may well have read about this on Front Porch Forum and wondered the way Gabrielle said, like, well, what does that mean for me? And so we
Yep.
could just reach out to them and say, we made the decision under this understanding. We've now learned this. And either A, we think everything stands and you're good, or just like, whatever the
Yeah.
message is that is
Yeah.
crafted.
Yeah, and I'm
Informed
looking
by
at
the
the second
town.
one and it's the same 4 conditions. So,
So what I'll do is I'll pull the 4 conditions from those 2 decisions and include those in an email to Kari, asking him to check with the league or the town's attorney regarding the best way for us to reach out to those 2, well, there were 4 people, those 4 people in those 2 applications. Does that, everybody, I don't think we need a motion on that, but like if thumbs up if you think that makes sense, or yeah. Okay. Thank you. So it was sort of messy, complicated learning process here. And I'm just curious, I don't know, like, what's the difference between an appeal and a challenge? That is the question I'm interested in, but I'm not a lawyer, so I can throw that question into the mix.
Aren't you a
Um,
lawyer?
No,
Oh, I always thought you were a lawyer.
I just work with a bunch of lawyers.
she
Well, I
works for
don't,
them.
I'm surrounded by them at work. Um, all right, rules of procedure, the best part of the day, afternoon, evening. So we went through a chunk of this last time we met. And then I think Rachel, you haven't had time to like send back, but you were gonna
Yeah,
do
I've
some
done most of
wordsmithing.
what we talked about, but I have
Okay.
not I've not kind of then done my second read of my changes and make sure they
Yeah.
still make sense. So, yeah.
So we can, maybe what we can do this evening is, I think we got to section 4, which is regular off, like we went up to that point, and then we didn't get beyond regular officers, as I recall. So if I can, I can share my screen. Oh, I'm gonna have to ask Scott to, allow me to do screen sharing. Scott, you are muted, but it may be that, like, it looks like you're doing lots of keystrokes and figuring this out.
Yes, I am not officially the host for this meeting
Okay,
because of those glitches we had,
okay. Well,
for whatever. But let's see, there may be
let's,
on your, you may be able to set your,
excuse
nope,
me.
I'm not seeing anything helpful there.
Okay. Well, in the spirit of time, does everybody have a copy of the rules of procedure handy to look at?
Yeah.
Okay. So, welcome, Phil. We're just starting on the part of the agenda, looking at the rules. Rules of procedure. So,
Thank you. Yeah, sorry I'm late. I didn't mean to be late.
oh, not to worry. We of all, I think, other than Gabrielle, I think we were all a little late due to schedules and or technology. So, regular officers, I'm not going to read verbatim. I'm just going to sort of skim through this. So it's the board shall consist of 7 members. And then at a meeting after town meeting, but before May 1st, there's an organizational meeting in which we elect by majority vote a chair, vice chair, and a clerk. Anybody have any substantive changes or edits or about that? Okay. So then there's the role of the chair. Presiding at meetings, deciding points of order, appointing members to any committee, administer oaths, request the attendance of witness, production of materials germane to any issue under consideration. I suspect that was pulled directly from somewhere else. I think I'm going to go on unless people have. So then the vice chair assumes the duties of the chair, and then the clerk assumes the duties if the chair and the vice chair are absent. And the clerk takes minutes unless delegated to a staff or other DRB member. I think that's all pretty straightforward. Okay. It shall be the duty of all members to review the minutes and other official records. I think we all agree that's important.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Then there's a section, maybe we did go through this already, because I'm seeing in my notes here for alternate members, we did discuss taking out that A, the alphabetical roster, because that's really just not the practice that's being and seemed cumbersome. And then we added, when an alternate member is appointed, they shall be counted towards meeting a quorum and the count of majority needed for action. And then we discussed when an alternate member participates in a business meeting, something, but I have to go back up to my other notes here. What did we say? I lost it. I don't see what.
What I have, Willa,
Yeah.
is, or what I've worked on is that member does not count towards the quorum necessary to hold a public meeting. However, the alternate member will be treated in all other ways as a member of the DRB and permitted to fully participate in all agenda items.
uh,
Does that,
That person
Sound like
doesn't
what-
count as a quorum.
they don't count as a
Towards quorum.
quorum, but they can be a full part of the meeting. Yeah. I think that's what our note was
Mhm,
up above on meeting.
yeah. And just for clarity in my own thinking here as I regroup. But if an alternate member is appointed, they shall be counted towards meeting a quorum and the count of majority needed for action. So I'm trying to
I think
get the
that's for a
distinction there.
proceeding.
For a
So I think
proceeding,
B is for
Yeah.
proceeding and
Okay.
E is for a business meeting.
business meeting. So I wonder if we should just add appointed
For a proceeding. Yeah.
or proceeding. Okay. Now that I've asked all my clarifying questions, does that make sense to others or questions, comments about that?
Makes sense to me.
Yeah. Okay. And of
Yes,
course, we
sounds
will
good.
have, okay, we'll have a chance to read this all individually in writing before we go forward. Then the section on meetings themselves, we talked about removing the town office because we've been asked not to meet there. We are to give 24 hours notice for special meetings. There's a definition of the quorum.
That I expect will just
Yeah.
become a reference. I'm gonna add a quorum definition above. So
Yeah,
that will just become a reference to the
Okay.
definition section.
I don't have this in front of me. But are you saying that we're actually restricting where we could meet? We're putting that in?
No, we're saying town hall or other public place.
Okay.
and I
Yeah.
think we might want to also add I can't remember what the new, I think we have to always have a virtual option as well as an in-person option now.
Yep.
So we probably should make that statement in here, in
Okay.
addition to,
Would it make sense,
yeah,
would it make sense to say something like, in addition to the current uh, public meeting rules, we will da 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 da. Special meetings are included in the um, in those complicated rules and require notice, I think, in 3 places, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
So we-
I can add that.
okay. So basically add the reference to the law,
Yep.
but also spell it out in short, in everyday
In addition
language.
to all requirements of Vermont's public meeting law. And then it'll go A through whatever. Yeah. So then we
Great.
don't have to have a separate one explaining the in-person and virtual option because that's in the public meeting law.
And I wonder if it's worth just stating it in here, though, even though it's in the law, because
Okay.
a new DRB member might just read this and not, I mean, ideally you would go read the public meeting law, but one might not, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so this, then that brings the, what's now C. Members may participate by telephone or other telecommunication method as long as the absent member can hear everything that is occurring and everyone present can hear that member. Members of the public may also participate, blah, blah, blah. So I wonder if that's necessary, because if we're saying earlier that we have to be both in person and virtually, if, you know, have a virtual option.
Well, it certainly wouldn't hurt to have in there to make it clear that the public can participate, that, you know, I think that's worth restating.
Restating, yeah.
Yeah.
And what people like current current terminology. I mean, I guess somebody could just call in, but you would call into Zoom or whatever the platform is. I mean, we don't really,
Well,
like
that's been done. I
conference.
mean, that happened with the Conservation Commission a couple times where people had to call in because their computers weren't working,
Okay,
you know, so that should definitely stay in. I don't know what it says. I don't know what it says in the public
Yeah.
meeting about that.
I just wonder if telecommunication covers telephone as well as
Good question.
computer-based systems.
My understanding is it does.
Yeah,
It does, yeah.
Yeah, it should.
I believe that was a robust discussion in GovOps, Gabrielle,
Mhm.
when they were making these changes. So
And what's her name didn't believe that rural internet is really a problem.
exists. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah.
One thing about the minutes is if we are gonna, because there were these big changes to open meeting law, including posting minutes, and it is, what is it now, 48 hours or something?
5 days.
So yeah, maybe just under the minutes section. I know you don't want to get too specific because it is all an open meeting law, but that was a change since this update in 2021.
And it's hard to meet that 5-day deadline. So I think
Yeah.
it's important naming that. I mean, it's doable, but when you've got a volunteer group, it's it can be challenging, put it that way. So I've got to find where that is. Minutes. Okay.
I think we may need to add it to this section,
Section.
or a section.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna put a note under, like I'm just doing in here, G, add requirement
Yep.
to post minutes within 5 days per law. here or somewhere else?
Does it say draft minutes? Because it's really the draft
Oh,
minutes, isn't it? that
That's,
get- that
yes,
get
it's a good
posted.
point. Yeah,
And it's really confusing sometimes, but that's, then I guess once they're finalized, those get posted also,
yeah.
Mhm.
yeah.
And it's interesting, there's no requirement about the final minutes, as as I recall.
There's not.
No,
Huh.
so
I'll put within 2 weeks. Is that enough
final
time for
minutes.
final minutes?
Well, the reality is like sometimes if the board doesn't meet, the final minutes may not be adopted for
Months.
months.
Yeah, within 5 or within 2 weeks of their approval. How about that?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Gabrielle, are there other parts of the open meeting law that you think should be highlighted or brought forth in in this document?
I am actually not an expert on the open meeting law. Well, are the requirements about how far in advance to post an agenda? And do we have to have on the agenda, does it have to list a public comment period? Or the public
Definitely
comment
has to list the
time?
public comment period. I don't remember if there was a change to the how far in advance. Let me take a
Okay.
look.
So it's probably 48 hours.
Yeah,
Or actually for towns, it's probably stricter.
And I think, you know, we as a quasi judicial group fall under the law is different than say some other public meeting
if we're
group.
meeting for proceeding, it is, yeah.
Yeah, so.
Yeah.
So checking it about adding how far in advance agenda should be posted and, oh, public comment item on the agenda, which we don't have on today's agenda, so I guess in the future I should do that. Okay. Unfortunately, I left it in the living room, but I did look at the Montpelier rules on the weekend and I saw some things, but of course I don't remember them. Like, oh, I wonder if we would want to do anything in addition. So maybe, so here's a question I just don't know. Talking about open meeting law. If I were to email all of you with ideas, can I do that? Or can I only bring the ideas to the group in a public meeting?
You
Does
can,
anybody
you
know?
can email them. My understanding is you can email them, but we can't discuss them over
Okay.
email. So email them and then we would talk about them at the next meeting and that would be fine.
Okay. That makes sense. Thank you. One of the things I'm going to do is write a little cheat sheet for the chair about all these little details, because I would say every week I've learned something new and I'm often learning it after the fact. So
Hmm.
anything more about that section about meetings?
I'm looking at the Secretary of State's slides on open meeting law, and one of the sidebars indicates non-advisory public bodies to electronically record each meeting and post the recording in a designated electronic location for 30 days after minutes have been posted.
That's right. I forgot about
There it
that.
is.
I thought it was minutes or recording. I
This
was
is-
never,
It says required public bodies to record and post the recording somewhere where people can find it. Well,
and
this
do
is
minutes?
yes, minutes are also, after the minutes have been recorded.
The select board's been doing that regularly.
Yeah.
They've been posting both the recording or the video actually and the minutes.
Yeah,
And Tegan asked Scott, asked that we record. And so Scott, I mean, this is recorded now, but
yeah,
one of our first meetings, Scott, you just did it on your phone, right? So,
yeah, yeah. Well, if somebody else wants to look, this is slide 21 on the Secretary of State, 20, June 12th, 24 presentation. It's posted on the Secretary of State's website.
so I've add requirement to post draft minutes and a recording. So we can add this and then look at the law and the Secretary of State's resources to make sure that we're in alignment with what is required.
Yeah, yeah, good.
Okay. All right, so the next section is public hearings and order of business. So public hearings are conducted as quasi judicial proceedings, according to the law that's referenced there. Hearings shall be publicly noticed. So here's but notice. So I guess some of this is probably going to also be referenced in the preceding section.
Yep.
And the public notice shall include a statement of which criteria the board will apply in review of the project and a statement that the board may apply other criteria as necessary. So one of our discussions was we talked about informing applicants of that directly, not just having it in the statement, like a public notice, which may go out, in shorter time period. Like we may know that, or we should know that earlier, I think. So what are people's thoughts about adding something that we would also inform the applicants of the criteria we plan to use, including the statement that other criteria may apply? Or do you feel that's not needed in this document?
I think that might put us in sort of a bind, and it might make sense to ask the trainer, the VLCT trainer, add this to the list of questions we have. This is from our rules of procedure. Do we really have to do this?
I'm gonna suggest, and this is one of the things I've been working on, that we change to the notice shall include a statement of which criteria the board expects it will apply, just to soften that.
Okay.
And then I
Right.
could add, the board will make efforts, again, not guaranteeing
Yeah.
it would happen, to advise the applicant or appellant of the criteria it expects it will use in reviewing the project.
Would you read
Sounds reasonable.
that last phrase,
The
Rachel?
board will make efforts to advise the applicant or appellant of the criteria it expects it will use in reviewing the project in advance of the meeting. Or the advance of the hearing. So it's not a guarantee. It's not like we're making a promise to applicants and appellants, but we are kind of holding ourselves to, that's a thing we're gonna try and be doing.
Got like that other, yeah, Stephanie.
Just wonder, how do we do this before the hearing? Who contacts the applicant? What's the
Chair.
procedure? The chair, and then the chair, but the chair decides which criteria apply, or,
That it expects will apply, yep.
I mean, because you can't, that's like one of those things you can't, the board can't discuss that ahead of time, via email, so.
Yeah.
I mean, my thinking is what I have tried to do is look at the application and go through it and say, I think these are the regulations, and then tell people that. And then when we've met, sometimes people have added others because I missed something. So I think that would be the process, I'd be saying to the applicant, from what I can tell, we're gonna be reviewing your application under these 5 criteria, but there may be others. You know, could have more formal verbiage, but that would be the gist of the message.
Well, I think it's a good idea. I'm just not sure how you'd go about that. You're going to send them an email or meet
Yeah.
with them or,
No, I mean, I think it would be an email, and if they emailed back asking for more information, I would say, I'm sorry, you'll have to wait for the hearing, you know, just sort of like it would
Yeah.
be just a point of information, so that partly, I think, so that people are prepared and have an understanding when they come to the hearing. Because something we had discussed is like what to expect at your, like a document, what to expect at your hearing, and it could be you're going to be sworn in, you know, like it's sort of weird if you're not expecting that. It's like, I gotta, you know, and here's some basic information, like we think these are the criteria. So, you know, if people are doing this on their own, they may not have even read those criteria, you know, may not have read the relevant section of the regulations.
I'm just thinking about what of this the zoning administrator maybe should be doing. I'm not sure.
Good
Certainly, certainly telling people what to expect at a hearing, a DRB hearing would be within the purview of the zoning administrator, I think. I'm not sure that he could do it, you know, on a specific application, say what the criteria are going to be. Or maybe, but maybe that is zoning administrator. I don't know.
Well, these are our rules of procedure, not
Not his.
zoning administrators. Yeah.
Yeah.
Expect it probably depends on who's in the position of the zoning administrator.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, definitely people should know ahead of time. They
Yeah.
should know ahead of time what to expect from the hearing. And they should know what the DRBs, because they need to know how to prepare.
Right.
You know, they need to know what they need to provide to the DRB under the regulations. Definitely. I'm just not sure what the appropriate procedure for doing that is.
I guess from my experience, I feel like there have been people in my limited experience, more than one, who's come to a hearing having no idea and not being prepared. And then, you know, we end up asking them all sorts of questions, some of which, you know, I think are challenging because people haven't had a chance to think about them or gather the relevant information. So
That's right. And then they go tell Jamie at the store that the DRB is giving him a hard time and it's hard to get a permit from the DRB because the DRB asks him all these questions. And then Jamie says, oh, well, there must be something wrong with the DRB. Let's get rid of Stephanie and Dot. Anyway,
Wow.
that's really what happened, and as you know, and so it's really a good idea for the applicant to know ahead of time what the
Mhm.
expectations are.
And I think I can remember somebody said, I guess it was Scott, these are our rules. So I think we can include that. This is what the DRB is going to do. And I think we can certainly talk at the training, we can ask the league's attorney, you know, how do other communities deal with like where the zoning administrator's role sort of overlaps or leaves off compared to the DRB, because I'm sure it depends a lot on the size of the community. And like if you have a full-time zoning administrator, I'm sure it's very different in those communities. So
So there's 2 documents that the town has. One is a request for variance and one is a request for conditional use. And those should be filled out if somebody is appealing the decision of the zoning office administrator to deny them a permit. And if we clean those applications up that say these things apply to a variance or these things apply to a conditional use request for a hearing, some of that data would be in front of the applicants before they even issue the document to the DRB. And I think those two documents are what we need to look at for making sure there's a list of all the things that may come up during the hearing for a variance and or a conditional use.
Totally. Yep.
Yep, good
And
idea.
so if we
We
just work,
should.
if we just work on reformatting that, so it asks all the questions that would be relevant that we would want to hear, and make sure that that form is easily filled out or understood by the applicants, that would take care of all of that information.
Well, but Toby, those are like 1-page forms, as I recall, and I'm just thinking like the number of questions in those tables in the zoning regs would that would take up a lot of space. So rather than try to have all of the zoning reg tables in there,
Yeah, that's
I
all.
wonder if it is just like there's some part of the process in which the tables are identified and then shared with the applicant. I like your idea of working on those applications because we've already identified that they are lacking. But I don't know that there's enough room on there to put all the tables that you know, that a variance may involve.
Well, it could be just a reference to where you need to look at the table that says, you know, if you're asking for a variance of shoreland or whatever, that you need to look at this section of the zoning regs in order to understand what you need to have.
But who's telling them? Who's telling them where they're, you know,
The
like,
zoning
because
administrator.
there's a lot of
Again,
layers and.
we'd have to look at what comes in as an application and see what would we have wanted that person to bring or know before they came before us for this type of variance or conditional use.
You know, Candy had volunteered to work on this because it's actually the planning commission, I think, that formally creates those documents, but we can recommend. And I think Candy was thinking in an ideal world, and I mean, I don't know enough about the details, but one could have a web-based form that's, you know, that you might say, oh, I'm in the shore, I'm in the shoreland district, overlay district. And then you would click and it would be a live link. It would take you to that portion of the regulations that are on the website. And maybe one could even then populate this document with like all that detail or some of that detail that you might not, as you say, Gabrielle, want in like a static form. So I mean, as I say, this is sort of off the top of my head, but I would think there are ways to sort of like not lead, but yeah, sort of lead somebody into finding the resources they need in order to provide the information that is needed, you know, that the board will want, or at least get them halfway there. I mean, Toby, if this is an area that I mean, you've already been thinking about it, maybe you could connect with Candy and the two of you could, sometimes it's easier to have a partner.
So the other thing is, so the zoning administrator is going to tell some applicant, well, you can't do this, and here's what you're gonna have to face. So maybe working with it as well, the planning commission with the zoning administrator to say, I'm denying this because you haven't met this, this, and this, and this, and maybe that's where the document starts, where the applicant faces the denial of what they want to do at the zoning administrator level. And that would trigger what you have to show to the DRB in order to get a variance or a change of use.
And we even talked earlier about the actual permit application, you know, most of which the zoning administrator grants, but even, I mean, that's the first document that then when the application is denied, we still get that basic a permit application as sort of the first piece of paper in the packet that we get. And often that's inadequate. I mean, we've had questions like, well, what if, you know, wouldn't it be helpful if, I can't think of a good example. So I think it's worth even going back to that first preliminary application that somebody completes because it remains part of an application, whether it's approved or not. So Toby, I'm gonna put you on the spot. Would you be willing to reach out to Candy and maybe work with her to sort of start chewing on those documents?
Yes, and I'm good friends with John McCullough as well, so I'll have some
Okay.
conversation about him about, you know, how we can, because he and I did talk about when I got on the DRB about what those applications to the DRB were and what information was on there. So
Mhm.
I'll start with him and I'll bring Candy in too, and then we'll see, you know, what path we want to suggest.
Sounds great. Thank you. It's 7:03. I want to respect people's time and probably wanting dinner and such. We we sort of just started into public hearings and order of business. I'm wondering if at this stage, if Rachel, you're making some changes and if you sent a version of that that we could use as a starting point for our next, which
Yes.
would be, okay, so that would be February, because January, we're gonna have our training, so.
Right. Yep.
Um,
That should not be a problem at all. I had hoped to have done more work on it by this meeting, but Thanksgiving folks visiting, it just didn't happen
yeah,
in the time that I had set aside for it. So,
no, totally understandable, and I like totally got blindsided. It's like, oh my gosh, Monday is our meeting, and I was,
Mhm.
and then my front porch forum posting didn't work. I don't know why I can't do that anymore, so. So next steps, Toby's gonna connect with John and Candy about forms. Rachel's gonna do more, like, send us a document with the edits in probably using track changes or something, so people can see that.
Yep.
And then we'll pick up where we left off in February, and maybe in February, we would then get to a point where we would have gone through this document. We're almost through it. And I will also look at the Montpelier, I think it was the Montpelier rules, and if I see anything I think might be of interest, I will email all of you with my ideas that we could then talk about in February. And the other piece is I will follow up with Kari about the status of the current regulations and past decisions we made under what we thought were current but are not current regulations. So anything else for the group this evening?
I apologize for holding things up at the beginning. I'll try to be better prepared next time. Or, well, next time we may be all in person. Yeah.
To be at the training in person in January, what are other people's plans?
I plan
I
to be
will
there in person.
aspire to be in person.
Yeah, I was planning to be there in person.
I'll be there in person, hopefully.
my plan as well.
I just, and when I find out who's giving the training, I'll let you all know, so. Great, well, thank you, everybody, and
Mhm.
have a good rest of your evening and see you in the new year, if not before.
Thanks, Willa.
Thank you,
Bye.
Willa.
Thank you all. Thank you all.
everybody.
Have a good
everybody.
night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So Scott said something about, I suggest you mute yourself. I don't know what I was muting and unmuting and muting and unmuting, and maybe I said something that people heard that I shouldn't have said. So I said, what did I say? And he didn't answer. Okay,